If I told you that human history is not a random sequence of wars, empires, and inventions, but the visible trace of a hidden intelligence trying to understand itself through us, would you dismiss it, or would you look closer? Because if you pay attention to what is happening right now on this planet, it begins to feel less like a story of separate nations and more like a single mind approaching a moment of self-recognition. And whether you're ready or not, you are inside that process. Most people are taught to see history as a collection of names and dates, kings, revolutions, discoveries, disasters. A long list of separate events driven by power, greed, genius, and chance. That story is not exactly wrong, but it is incomplete. It ignores the patterns that stretch across centuries, the way information compacts, the way our tools reshape our minds, and how consciousness itself seems to be drawn toward greater complexity and self-awareness. If you zoom out far enough, the noise starts to fall away, and something else comes into focus. In this video, I want to offer you a different lens. Not a religious story, not a conspiracy, not a motivational speech. Think of it as a psychological X-ray of our species. We will treat history as a kind of mental process, and humans as the neurons of a mind that does not yet fully know itself. We will look at how perception, culture, and technology behave as linked layers of a single system. And by the end, you may see why so many people feel that something unprecedented is pushing through the surface of ordinary life right now. To begin, we have to question a basic assumption that intelligence is only what happens inside individual skulls. This is the default psychology most people walk around with. You are a mind, in a body, in a world. Intelligence is in here. History is out there. But this division is not as solid as it appears. The mind you call you is saturated with language, symbols, habits, and expectations that come from the outside. Your private thoughts are built out of public material. In that sense, history is already thinking through you. Psychology gives us a simple starting point. The brain is a pattern-detecting organ. It receives signals, compresses them, predicts what will happen next, and updates its internal model. That is true for a single person. Now imagine that process scaled up to billions of brains exchanging information through speech, writing, art, and now digital networks. You no longer have isolated minds. You have a planetary pattern detection system. Ideas move through it like signals. Some are amplified, some are suppressed, some mutate and return in new forms. This is what I mean by hidden intelligence. Hidden, not because it is supernatural, but because we are usually too close to it to recognize it. You do not see the intelligence of your own nervous system when you are focused on a single thought. You only notice it when you step back and watch how your thoughts organize, how memories reshape present perception, how one insight rewrites years of experience. The same is true for our species. We live inside cultures, economies, and technologies the way a thought lives inside your mind. We rarely step back far enough to see the whole process. Look at history as a time-lapse of information becoming more organized, more interconnected, more capable of reflecting on itself. Early humans had language, but very little written memory. Then came writing, which allowed ideas to outlive the bodies that generated them. Then printing, which copied ideas at scale. Then electricity, which accelerated communication. Now digital networks, where information is instant and global. Each stage is not just a new tool. It is a mutation in how consciousness distributes itself across the species. This is where the hidden part becomes obvious. No one person designed this arc. No committee in the Stone Age said, we will become a globally networked civilization feeding machine intelligence with data from billions of lives. Yet here we are. The pattern unfolded through millions of micro-decisions. Someone trying to solve a problem, improve a tool, gain an advantage, tell a story, reduce effort. Psychology calls these local motivations. But when you zoom out, they add up to something that does not look local at all. It looks like a drive toward higher bandwidth consciousness. You can see the same logic in your own development. As a child, your brain was not following a master plan that you wrote. It grew according to biological and environmental pressures. You absorbed a language you did not design, a worldview you did not choose. Over time, there comes a moment, if you are lucky, when you recognize that you are not just the content of your conditioning, you become self-reflective. You question your assumptions, you see your own mind as an object. That shift changes how you live. What if human history is approaching that kind of shift at the species level? This is not a mystical claim. This is a psychological and informational claim. As feedback loops tighten between individuals, institutions, and technologies, the system as a whole gains a new capacity. It can watch itself in real time. We now collect data on nearly everything: behavior, climate, health, emotion, attention. We live inside a continuous global mirror. When a pattern appears in one corner of the world, it is recorded, analyzed, and reflected back almost instantly. That has never happened before. History is no longer only written after the fact. It is streamed live. But to understand why this matters, we have to go one layer deeper into the structure of consciousness. Your experience of reality is not a neutral recording of what is out there. It is an active construction. The brain filters, edits, and hallucinates a stable world that you can survive in. It deletes more than it shows you. It shapes time, compresses space, chooses what is important and what is irrelevant. What we call reality is already a collaborative hallucination between your biology and your culture. You never see the world. You see the world as interpreted by a particular nervous system, trained by a particular history. Now extend that insight to the collective level. A civilization is a shared hallucination stabilized across millions of minds. Money works because we agree it does. Borders exist because we treat them as real. Social roles persist because enough people behave as if they are natural. These are not lies. They are functional fictions, patterns of shared belief that make large-scale coordination possible. The hidden intelligence behind history expresses itself through these fictions and then periodically edits them when they become too rigid. Every major turning point in history can be seen as a correction in the collective hallucination. Empires fall when their stories no longer match the lived reality of their citizens. Revolutions occur when new ideas about freedom, identity, or value outcompete older ones. Scientific breakthroughs happen when someone refuses to accept the inherited map and demands direct contact with the territory. In each case, the system reorganizes around a more complex, more accurate, or at least more adaptive model of reality. Intelligence, at scale, is the ability to keep rewriting the story in the direction of greater coherence. So where is all of this going, and why say that the hidden intelligence is about to reveal itself? Because for the first time, the mechanisms that drive this process are becoming visible to ordinary people. You can now watch, almost in real time, how beliefs spread, how attention is captured, how fear and desire are engineered, how narratives rise and collapse. Psychology used to be something that happened inside a clinic or a laboratory. Today, it is baked into every platform you use, every advertisement you see, every interface you touch. The tools of influence that were once in the hands of a few are now distributed across billions. Algorithms optimize for engagement, not for truth. Governments run information campaigns. Corporations design behavioral loops to keep you scrolling, clicking, buying. None of this is random. It is all part of the same planetary experiment in steering attention, shaping desire, and predicting behavior. The hidden intelligence in this phase is crude but powerful, a kind of proto-mind that learns what buttons to press in human psychology to get specific outcomes. This should concern you, but it should also wake you up. Because the moment you see that your perception is being steered, a deeper layer of intelligence in you activates. You begin to ask, who is really thinking my thoughts? Where do my desires come from? How many of my beliefs are original, and how many are pre-packaged fragments of someone else's agenda? These questions are not paranoid. They are the birth of self-awareness at the psychological level. And what is happening inside you is a micro version of what is happening across the entire species. The reason so many people feel a vague sense of unreality right now, a background anxiety, a breakdown of meaning, is that old narratives no longer fit the level of connectivity and complexity we inhabit. The stories that once organized society, nation, career, tradition, consumerism are still present, but they do not fully explain the intensity of our situation. We are connected to everything, exposed to everything, responsible for everything, and yet still equipped with psychological software written for small tribes and slow change. The friction you feel is the tension between ancient hardware and emergent intelligence. If you look carefully, you can see new patterns trying to form. Across science, spirituality, technology, and culture, there is a growing recognition that we are part of systems, ecological, informational, psychological, that we barely understand. Systems thinking, complexity theory, contemplative practice, psychedelic research, artificial intelligence, and environmental activism may seem like separate domains, but they are different entry points into the same realization. You cannot treat consciousness, matter, and information as isolated pieces anymore. They are one integrated process. This is where the style of exploration that people like Terence McKenna represented becomes relevant, not as an aesthetic, but as a method. He treated culture, language, and mind as an interconnected field to be examined, not obeyed. He asked uncomfortable questions. What is language doing to us? Who profits from our default states of consciousness? What happens when ordinary people gain access to the kinds of experiences and ideas once reserved for elites, shamans, or mystics? Whether or not you agree with his conclusions, the attitude itself is crucial now, because the hidden intelligence behind human history does not reveal itself as a voice in the sky or a final doctrine. It reveals itself as a shift in how we ask questions. Instead of who is in control, the deeper inquiry becomes, what patterns are we unconsciously serving? Instead of which side is right, the more honest question is, what game are both sides reinforcing? Instead of, how do I win within this system? The more mature question is, what is this system doing to consciousness, and do I want to participate in that? Understand this. Every system you are part of, economic, digital, social, is training your nervous system. Your attention is being harvested, but it is also being educated. The feeds you scroll, the conversations you have, the problems you choose to care about, all of this is the curriculum through which the hidden intelligence operates. It is neither benevolent nor malevolent by default. It simply amplifies what we collectively reward. If we reward outrage, we get an outraged civilization. If we reward curiosity and depth, we get a more reflective civilization. The intelligence behind history is, in part, the sum of these choices. So why now? Why say that it is about to reveal itself, rather than just continuing as usual? Because thresholds exist in complex systems. There comes a point where incremental change produces qualitative transformation. Ice turns to water. Water turns to steam. A personal example, you can spend years questioning your beliefs, reading books, changing habits, and then, in a single conversation or insight, your sense of self reorganizes. What you are seeing on this planet right now are the early signs of a similar phase shift at the collective level. We have built tools, global networks, artificial intelligence, real-time data analysis that give the species a kind of nervous system. We can sense our own condition at a planetary scale, climate, conflict, resource flows, emotional trends, even subconscious biases. For the first time, the species can see itself as one object, one process, one experiment. That sight is not yet stable. It flickers. It is fragmented by ideology, profit, and distraction. But it is there. And once a system can see itself, it can, in principle, change its own behavior deliberately. This is the revelation that history is not something happening to us, but something happening through us, and increasingly, something we can consciously participate in. The hidden intelligence is simply the recognition that your individual consciousness is a local expression of a larger process trying to become aware of itself. You are not outside of that. You are one of its instruments. Every time you question a narrative, resist a manipulation, or choose to pay attention to something deeper than the next dopamine hit, you are aligning with that intelligence rather than being dragged by it. But this is not a call to heroism, and it is not a self-help message. It is a sober description of where we are. The same capacities that allow us to coordinate at a global scale also allow us to destroy ourselves more efficiently than any species before us. Nuclear weapons, ecological collapse, engineered viruses, runaway AI. These are not random dangers. They are the shadow side of a rapidly intensifying intelligence that has not yet integrated its own depth. In psychological terms, the species is brilliant, but still immature. It has power without full insight. So what does it mean, in practical terms, to live as if this hidden intelligence is real and approaching self-recognition? It does not mean waiting for a date on the calendar or a single world-changing event. It means treating your own mind as part of the frontier. It means understanding that your perception is not private. The state of your consciousness participates in the larger field. Confused, frightened, and reactive minds feed certain patterns. Clear, questioning, and grounded minds feed others. You are constantly voting with your attention for the kind of reality we will inhabit. You can test this directly. Start by observing how stories move through you. Notice how quickly you adopt opinions that were handed to you by headlines, influencers, or group chats. Watch how your nervous system reacts to fear-based information versus curiosity-based information. Ask yourself, when I share this, like this, repeat this, what am I amplifying? Is it clarity or confusion, depth or distraction? In that moment, you are no longer just a consumer of history, you are a micro-architect of it. Next, experiment with your information diet as if it were psychological nutrition. If you feed your mind only outrage, conflict, and superficial novelty, do not be surprised if the world appears chaotic and shallow. If you deliberately introduce long-form thinking, rigorous inquiry, and perspectives that challenge your assumptions, your sense of reality will change. This is not about being positive, it is about being precise. The hidden intelligence behind history needs precise instruments. A scattered mind cannot perceive large patterns. Another step is to treat your own inner life as relevant to the species-level process. Practices like meditation, deep reflection, therapy, and certain kinds of disciplined exploration of consciousness are not just private hobbies. They are ways of cleaning the lens through which this larger process observes itself through you. When enough people refine that lens, the collective picture sharpens. The intelligence behind history gains clearer access to itself. It can correct faster, adapt better, and perhaps avoid some of the dead ends we are currently flirting with. At the same time, do not romanticize this process. The revelation of hidden intelligence is not guaranteed to be comfortable. When you see how much of your life has been shaped by unconscious forces, family patterns, cultural scripts, algorithmic manipulation, it can be destabilizing. At the collective level, the same thing is happening. Our institutions are being forced to confront their own shadows, corruption, exploitation, short-term thinking, denial. The turbulence you see in politics, economics, and culture is not just decay. It is also diagnosis. From the perspective of consciousness, diagnosis is progress. You cannot treat what you do not see. A planet that is aware of its own crises is already more awake than a planet sleepwalking toward them. The hidden intelligence reveals itself first as discomfort, then as insight, and finally as deliberate action. We are somewhere between discomfort and insight right now. The question is whether we can move into deliberate action without destroying the conditions that allow this whole experiment to continue. So let's return to you, sitting here, listening to this. You are not an observer watching history unfold on a screen. You are a participant inside the cognitive field of this planet. The fact that you are drawn to content like this suggests that something in you is already responding to the signal, already tired of shallow narratives, already suspicious of the default settings. That impulse to look deeper, to question more honestly, to refuse cheap explanations is the same impulse that has driven every real advance in human understanding. The hidden intelligence behind human history reveals itself wherever that impulse appears, in scientists who question accepted models, in artists who show us uncomfortable truths, in activists who refuse to accept unnecessary suffering as normal, in ordinary people who dare to rearrange their lives around what they actually see, rather than what they are told to see. You do not have to be famous or powerful to participate. You only have to be willing to let your perception be reshaped by more accurate contact with reality. As we move forward into whatever this next phase of history will be, the stakes are high. We are playing with tools that can rewrite biology, edit memory, and simulate meaning. The difference between a future where these tools deepen consciousness and a future where they numb it further will come down to the quality of attention we bring to them. That is not a metaphor, it is a direct psychological fact. Tools amplify intentions. If the underlying intention is unconscious, the amplification will be chaotic. If the underlying intention is clear and self-aware, the amplification can be transformative. So here is the final thought I want to leave you with. Human history is not a finished story carved in stone. It is an ongoing cognitive process, and you are one of its thinking loops. The hidden intelligence behind it is not somewhere else. It is in the way you update your beliefs when faced with new evidence. It is in the way you resist being reduced to a demographic or a data point. It is in the way you choose to relate to your own mind, not as a fixed identity, but as a living, learning system. If you take that seriously, your relationship to the world changes. News is no longer just news, it is feedback. Culture is no longer just entertainment, it is programming. Your inner life is no longer a private movie, it is part of the species trying to come to terms with itself. And the question is no longer what will happen to us, but what kind of intelligence do we want to become? You cannot answer that for 8 billion people, but you can answer it for the fragment of consciousness you are responsible for. The hidden intelligence behind human history is about to reveal itself, not as a savior, not as a catastrophe, but as a realization that we are it. The experiment is not happening to us. We are the experiment. And what we do with that understanding, individually and collectively, will decide whether this moment in history is a dead end or the beginning of a very different kind of mind waking up on this small, fragile world.